the pleasure of meeting and getting to know her this summer. I was her student in a graduate class offered by NKU. The focus was arts administration. And she could talk more about like, what is arts administration and what kinds of jobs are entailed in that. And you're also currently involved in grant writing, which I think is kind of a broadly applicable talent, not specific to the arts. If you're interested in the sciences, a lot of scientific research studies are sponsored by grants. So grants can kind of cut across the board. But I'll let you introduce yourself, your specialties, and then students, please feel free to chime in, ask questions. You can use the chat box. You can use the sort of raise your hand. Where's that one? This one option. You can just speak up, whatever. So I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thanks. It's really nice to meet you all, and thanks for carving out time today during your lunch hour. I'm excited to see that some folks are on campus. It's a really beautiful time of year to be like on campus, and just that energy of being there and like walking in between the buildings, and the weather's really nice. It's just, this is a great time of year. So it's really nice to meet you all. To share a little bit about me, my background and degree, I am an NKU alum twice over, I guess you could say. I have an undergraduate degree from the School of the Arts, which at the time that I was on campus, it was just the Fine Arts School, I think is what we called it. And I have a BFA in dance, and like, I think it's like theater arts. And then I went on and completed a nonprofit certificate in the public administration program with Julie Olberding and some of those folks over there. So twice over, and I'm actually married to an NKU graduate as well. I think Audrey, you mentioned chemistry or biology. Faith, you might have mentioned science too. He's a chemistry, he has 2 degrees, chemistry and photography. So it's been interesting to see how he has used both of those skill sets as well. So, but my background is largely in the arts, and so would love to share a little bit with you in terms of where that's taken me and what I've done or accomplished as part of a career, and how that might be applicable if you're interested at all. I will say it took a little bit of time to figure out how I was going to translate my passion and interest in being a performer and a dancer into a career. And I did for a long time have visions of moving away and living in New York City and being the Broadway actress. And I did part of that. I did move away and live in New York City, but it was my time in the nonprofit certificate program that kind of opened my eyes to careers that were out of the spotlight and behind the scenes, from a wide variety of, planning an artistic season to executing on educational programs to raising money. So it took a little bit of time to get to make that jump from performer to practitioner. And that's what I have spent, probably close to 15 years now in that space. So I got my undergrad degree from Northern, and then decided that I was going to leave Northern Kentucky behind. It was too small for me. And I left and went to New York City and pursued a master's degree in arts administration. I say too small in a little bit of jest, because I was very naive at that time, and thinking that Cincinnati had nothing for me. And as someone who grew up here in Northern Kentucky and was drugged to campus as a kid while my mom was completing her master's degree in teaching, I always said that I was going to grow up and leave. And I ended up at Northern and loving it. I did leave, but it took moving away to kind of realize, wait a second, we have all of these amazing arts and food and culture and people in the greater Cincinnati region. And so I'm glad I had an adventure, but I'm super happy to be back and settled and have roots in an area that I appreciate far more. Sadly, I think it took leaving a little bit to realize that. But I'm back and have been back since 2008 and have worked in a variety of arts organizations in our city. So if you're familiar with the Cincinnati Art Museum and the Cincinnati Symphony, those are what we consider anchor institutions. So they're institutions that have been around for a very, very long time. Some of them are coming up on their centennial anniversary. And so we have some very forward-minded folks to thank who had the desire and passion to start, the opera, the symphony, the art museum way back in the early 1910s and 20s. And so spent a good amount of time in a fundraising position. And so that is a job where I was raising money to support programs for the arts. I think at one point in my career, I wrote a grant to purchase a piano. And that sounds very silly, but it's probably one of the most poignant memories of my time helping raise funds for an arts organization, was that it was a very tangible need, and writing a grant sometimes can be difficult in telling a really impactful story in a small amount of space. And there's not really a ton that you can say about a piano that's very sexy to a funder. It's just a piano, and the symphony needed a new one. But we were able to secure funding for it. And so the first concert where the piano was debuted, I was there in the audience. And so that was just really meaningful, because it was kind of like life coming back full circle to where I could see a piece of myself on stage, and that knowing that I had played a part in raising this money and securing a really important thing for the symphony. And no, I wasn't first chair violin, or I wasn't in the spotlight acting or dancing or what have you. But that has been a really interesting turn in my career, I think, in coming to this, I don't know if it's understanding or just coming to this place where I realized that my time, treasure, and talent can be still utilized in the artistic space and in that sector, but maybe not in the ways I had initially thought. So in the last several years, I've worked at the Symphony and the Art Museum. I think I mentioned that. And then I also worked for an organization called ArtsWave, which is a funder. They are a unique organization. If you haven't heard of them, I highly recommend checking them out. They have a great resource on their website for free arts events, and also ticketed. But if you're looking for something to do at pretty much any day, at any hour, their arts guide calendar will give you some great information. And in my time there, I was on, I guess you could say, the very opposite side of raising money to support arts organizations. We were giving money back to the community. So we had a team of folks that were out collecting the donations and asking folks like you and me to give tiny little bits out of their paycheck every week, or a one-time gift. And in many cases, a lot of these gifts are $25 or $50. And so that adds up over time. And so we had a team that was raising money, and then we had a team that was helping give it away to support organizations like the symphony and the opera, and not just our big anchor institutions, but our really small institutions, who some have been started by NKU grads. So that was always really interesting and exciting to see local organizations that have started at a very grassroots level. So I won't bore you with all of the details of my resume, but just thought it would be helpful to share that I've spent a good majority of my professional career working in an arts organization, and have learned just some really fascinating insight around being a part of that sector and contributing to the strength of the sector. And I will say I have seen folks from all walks of life come into an arts administrative role. And that could be anything from, again, helping plan a season, but it could also be on the accounting side or the marketing side, even an evaluation. And so I've seen folks come in with really interesting backgrounds, like an accounting background, or perhaps about like a data background, or maybe even just like very technical and they're very interested in coding and developing. And so those skill sets can and do get put to use in terms of developing apps and building websites and marketing shows, and even administering database, like ticketing databases. So there's a wide range of application if you're interested at all in exploring that. And if you feel like maybe a career or a full-time position isn't for you, I would also encourage you to check out the ArtsWave website, because they do have great opportunities for volunteering. And if you feel so inclined, or you feel brave enough to want to devote a good amount of your time as a volunteer, you could also sit on a board. And that is a group of advisory volunteers who help guide the organization above and beyond what the paid staff get to do. So if you're ever in a position where you feel like you might want to be giving back, and you're thinking that you want your volunteer time to maybe be more than, say, an usher at an event or something, and you want to really like dig in with an organization, you could look at serving on their board in a volunteer capacity. And then you get to help make some high level decisions about where the organization is going and what they're focusing on, what their vision and mission is. So that's a really rewarding experience too. If it's one thing I can share with you about the Cincinnati arts community, Piper, Audrey, and Faith, I'm not sure if you're native to Northern Kentucky, if you're familiar with our arts community, but they are hands down one of the most warm and welcoming communities that you will find, particularly in arts sectors across the country. And I don't know what it is that creates that magic elixir that everyone just plays very nicely together in the sandbox. And there are always opportunities to reach out and connect if there's an organization that you're interested in, or a type of art, music or visual arts or photography, you name it. There's an organization here that would welcome you with open arms, to have a phone call or to meet in person or to get involved. And that is something, having lived in a much larger city, is just not that dynamic, was not there in New York. And I would say that that's probably a similar dynamic in other really large cities, but here in Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky play really nicely together. Even the arts organizations in Northern Kentucky collaborate very frequently with folks on the other side of that vast river that sometimes just seems too big to cross. It's funny, I live in Anderson Township. So if you know where Riverbend is and Coney Island, I'm about 1.5 miles from those, from Coney Island. And my family I have some family that live in Fort Thomas and in Newport. And so they're literally one exit away, but they can't wrap their brain around why we live in Ohio. And we're like, I think we're closer to you than you are to some other family members who also live in Kentucky. So it's kind of funny sometimes, that mental block about crossing over. And then when I drive into downtown, I go from Ohio into Kentucky and back into Ohio. So I digress. But yes, if you're interested at all in exploring or digging into some offerings that our arts community has, I highly recommend checking out ArtsWave and plugging in. There is also a young professionals group through ArtsWave. There is an LGBTQIA ally group that has amazing Pride events and Pride sponsored artistic happenings, so in collaboration with the Symphony or the Art Museum. And I believe there are some other affinity groups at ArtsWave as well, but those two I think are two of the most active affinity groups that they have. So if you're looking to connect with other individuals in like a similar age group, they do have a pretty active young professionals group. And I would say that's probably pretty true for most of the large arts institutions. What else can I share? I don't want to bore you with the details, but in terms of how I've taken a skill set that seemingly at first I was like, how am I going to make this work as an actor and a dancer? And then, transitioning to a practitioner. And that has been really rewarding, and also a really great opportunity to exercise creativity and problem solving, and thinking about having, a baseline knowledge of the art or the genre, and how that supports somebody working in an administrative role. But I've also seen folks come in who have never gone to a symphony concert, or maybe have never seen a professional ballet company, and come in and work in the sector and contribute equally amazing ideas, given that they're coming in with a different lens and a different set of experiences that help shape the art sector. And that's great. We want folks from all types of backgrounds, so that it isn't just the dancers and the artists and the painters of the world, that there are other folks involved in helping guide the arts experiences that are available to our community.
I think that the idea that the arts just happen because a bunch of artists want to do their art together is like not at all true, that you need some kind of organization to put on concerts, put on performances, display artworks in museums, do the fundraising to get those things happening. You've mentioned the word sector a few times, and I thought it was maybe useful to kind of just briefly outline. We've got our nonprofit sector, we have our private, like our business sector, our for-profit sector, and then like the government is the other sector. So, and I think one of my preconceptions was nonprofit equals no profits equals you don't get paid in this line of work, which is not true, right?
Correct. Not true. And it's interesting, the art sector has really evolved over time. So even 10 or 15 years ago, you did not see the number of entrepreneurial endeavors that you do now. And so we have this very traditional sector, if you will, when you think about our museums and our symphonies and our ballet companies. But now we're also starting to see these artist entrepreneur endeavors, some really just creative collaborations, content collaborators. There's a lot happening with social media and video platforms. And so that can also be lumped in to the art sector when we think about nonprofit. There are, of course, artists out there who make a living selling their art and are commercial artists, and that is absolutely happening when we think about what it means to be a nonprofit. We're operating for the sake of the community, for the benefit of the community. Our entire mission would be then to create experiences that are contribute to a community's vibrancy, or allow individuals access to an art that they may not be able to access otherwise. So when you think about the mission of the work, having a charitable intent at heart is really what would help delineate what would be a nonprofit versus a for-profit. But don't be surprised if you see a little bit of both here in Cincinnati, because we do have a growing industry of entrepreneurs here in the city. We have a lot of incubators that are helping launch businesses, and some of those might be focused on the art or an artistic type genre. I think we have one startup that is doing something with like music and like music rights and a speaker. I don't know, but they're on the for-profit side. And then we have nonprofits that are started every year that are strictly for the good of the community, to either produce and perform or present art, or maybe just educate kids about music and art, etc. So there's a wide range. And Leanne's right, the term nonprofit does not mean no profit. It just means that all profits that are generated as a result of your operation get funneled back into the work. So if we started an organization here and we had a really great year and we had extra money at the end of the day, we wouldn't all be splitting it up as a bonus, or, if I'm like owning a piece of stock and I get this like dividend or payback, that's really the biggest difference. But, and I won't stay on my soapbox too long about this, but the nonprofit industry as a whole is typically an underfunded and underpaid industry. And those folks work ridiculous hours and pouring their time and energy and talent, and they should be paid as such. And so some folks are paid with salaries that aren't as competitive as what you would find if you went and worked in a for-profit. And so there's definitely a difference there. But then you also see folks that run very large nonprofits like the United Way or another household name. And if you were to look at their salaries, if I'm the president and CEO, they probably have a very competitive salary. So there's a wide range, but in general, salaries are a bit lower than the for-profit sector. And that's one thing that folks who are interested in coming into this line of work or who maybe are volunteering is to continually be an advocate for ensuring that nonprofits pay their folks well and compensate them well, because there's a lot of additional things that we do. We might have galas to go to on the weekend, or we might take a donor out to lunch and we're, driving them in our car. There's a lot of extras that might come along with the job. You're in costuming or you're in the set design and you're constantly running and picking things up, and it's like your gas that you're using, or there's just a lot of extra that sometimes doesn't get counted. And so I'm always advocating for paying folks what they're worth and then some, and then add some to that. Because we are giving a lot of our time and talent. And so hopefully we see the treasure come back. But if you do decide to go that route, and nonprofit in general, even if it's not arts, maybe it's education or some other field of the nonprofit sector, you can still make a very reasonable salary, if not a very competitive salary. So I don't want that to deter you, but it is helpful to know it's not going to look
like the kind of passion element and the giving back to your community element. So these kind of intangibles that you're not going to put a price tag on, but you may, at the end of the day, you may feel better about the work you're doing to make this museum or this ballet company or whatever, to make that work in your community versus I sell shaving razors and I sell them really well. That may just not be the thing that you're passionate about. And then there may also, I should put a plug, this is kind of beyond the arts world, but overlapping a little bit, as you mentioned.
You froze.
ArtsWave, but then there's also there's tons of advocacy groups. So if there's a cause that's not related to the arts that you just really are passionate about, there is undoubtedly some nonprofit out there that is advocating for that as well. And it could be advocating for changes to the laws at the state or the national level, or even the community level. It could be, doing outreach, education, training. So
for sure.
I want to hear from our students. Oops, we just lost one of them. There we go. So question for you guys, a couple questions. Are there kind of particular causes that you find yourself really passionate about, that you really care about? They may or may not be related to your major. And then a second question might be, do you remember any kind of arts experiences you had in maybe high school or middle school that were really powerful or impactful for you as a student? You can answer either or both.
Can I just add in?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So for the first question, I'm a psych major. One, because I just like the way the mind works. I like learning about it. It's interesting. But I also, this kind of ties in with the high school thing too, but I was in Hope Squad, which is a suicide prevention group in high school. And I was really passionate about that. And it ended up saving one of my friends' lives at one point. And so that kind of just proved the reason why I wanted to do psychology. So I'm really big on mental health awareness and just fundraising towards places that can help people who have mental health issues, and not just with suicide, but anything. And then for the high school part, I was in choir for 7 years, and I love doing it. And it definitely shaped a part of who I am, just because I did it so much. And I love singing, and I love just watching people sing. And my boyfriend makes fun of me sometimes because I'm I'm just sitting there like listening to like an operatic sounding thing, and I'm like, oh my God, isn't it so pretty? Like, and he's just like, what? He doesn't get it. It's just like it made me look at things a little different, and like you hear differently because you've learned, like what to listen for, and like I noticed things that my boyfriend wouldn't, kind of thing. So that's that's basically it for
I
me.
love both of those answers. And I would just add in there, there's tons of cases, right, where public schools defund the arts, right? Or high schools might not even have a choir program anymore. And so some of the ways that nonprofits can step in would be like after school programs or neighborhood community programs where they help supplement those things that maybe schools aren't providing anymore.
That happened in elementary school. We didn't have a gym, the arts, or like anything like that, and that really sucks, because I love that kind of stuff. Like I'm definitely more of an art person, and it's just I hated that we didn't have that for like the last 3 years of elementary school. But in high school it was kind of the same thing. Like the athletics always got the funds, and rather than the arts, and that's kind of disappointing because like the people in the arts are just as passionate about what they're doing as the people who are playing like football, or so definitely like raising money for that kind of thing. We always did fundraisers. I love doing those. Just to raise funds for the arts in particular is really important.
Piper, since you're interested in psychology, this might be interesting for you. There are several arts organizations that have been intentional about training their staff around some trauma-informed care practices. I am not as familiar with all that goes into that, but I'm sure you're not surprised that when art educators are out working with kids, that it can bring stuff up. It's a healing medium, and it's a way to connect or express where kids feel safe. And so some of our arts organizations are saying, hey, we're trying to teach some art concepts, but this other stuff is bubbling up, and we want to be more equipped to either help address or like funnel those needs. So I thought that was really interesting that there are some that are learning about and incorporating that trauma-informed care in their education outreach. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to add something else in, but like another thing, like with art in general, like whether it's dance or music or like choir or anything, like there's definitely like emotion tied to those songs or like dances or whatever. And you saying that is like, that's a good thing to do, like talking to kids about like, trauma that they've had and like how they can incorporate that into their like expression of dance or choir or whatever. So that's really cool that you mentioned that.
Faith or Audrey, would you like to contribute any thoughts?
For the for the first question, like causes I really care about are like anything like LGBTQ plus related and mental health awareness, of course. And then for the second one, any like art experiences I had. I come from like a really small school, so like we didn't really have funding for much like art things, so I don't really recall any like arts. Plus I wasn't really involved in like choir or dance, but I just don't really recall any experiences that I had.
I think that's kind of telling in its own way, right? That not all kids have access to this, or young adults have access to these things, which is all the more reason we need advocacy for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Audrey, I saw you turn on your camera.
Yes, I apologize for accidentally quitting the meeting. My internet decided to just act all funky and delete Zoom, so I'm back though.
I'm glad you weren't just angry with us and decided to leave.
Yep. One thing, actually, a few things I'm really passionate about, like the other two have also mentioned, is like LGBT and mental health are two things I'm very, very passionate about. Just in general, and I'm working every day to like bring awareness and stuff. That's what I do most of the time on social media, as well as like sharing posts and stuff to share experiences. Another, and as for like the second question about what kind of art experiences, I also came from like a very small school, but like I'm very lucky to have gone to a school that did also care about the arts. We had a great musical program. Like my graduating class was 54, if that puts into perspective like how small my
That is
school was.
small.
But like the musical theater was one way that like our school just all got together. Like our school didn't really have any like cliques. And so like a lot of people were like participating in different ways. I took art for 3 years of my high school. And the reason why I didn't take it senior year is just because it didn't fit in my schedule. One thing I did was our school participated in this project to receive a photo of a kid from
Uh-oh.
a photo was of a girl from like I think Pakistan who was in the where she was like dishomed and stuff from like wars and whatnot. And we did a portrait of these kids and sent it back to them. And so that was one thing we did. Another thing I did was I participated in like our county art show with a sculpture type of project. And I think I got like second or third place in the sculpture category. Like there's lots of different categories. So I've always, since I was a kid, as long as I can remember, I've always loved arts. I still like hands-on stuff. I like to crochet. I'd love to relearn how to quilt. I did quilting in 4-H one year. My grandmother paints a lot, and so I learned a lot of stuff from her. I learned how to sew from like my aunts and my grandmother as well. So like I'm all up in the visual arts.
Very cool. Lots of and arts and crafts too. Like there's this sort of combination there. Kara, I wonder if you could speak about your current organization that you work for. There, as I understand, there's a strong education component in there.
Yeah, so I'm I guess we buried the lead a little bit. I'm not at an arts organization at the moment. For a couple different reasons. I still very much love and support Cincinnati arts organizations and had an opportunity to switch jobs, but still stay here in the Cincinnati area, but work for a national organization. And similar to ArtsWave, we raise money through grants. We write a lot of grants and then we give it away to, right now we have 70 communities across the country. Cincinnati is actually one of our communities, so it's kind of convenient that we're located here and we're also giving in Cincinnati, but we're investing in communities all across the country with the hopes that our dollars will help communities come together for better outcomes for youth and families. And so a lot of that we know takes place at school. If your home life isn't stable, then that spills over into your school life and vice versa. And so we're working with communities to have better outcomes all across the spectrum. And so from babies all the way up to your age, as kids are graduating high school and going into a career, post-secondary. And we spend a lot of time looking at what it takes to improve outcomes for youth and families of color in those communities that are disproportionately impacted by systems that weren't built for them. And so we do a lot of work in coaching communities to be able to fix those systems. So it is not in the art sector every day, all day long, which is why I love to still do things like this, where I can talk with other allies and supporters of the art sector. But it has been a really great opportunity to work at a national scope and scale, and to be an advocate for the arts within this role as we think about like, what does it take to, help communities become stronger, and the arts have to have a seat at the table. We need those creative minds when we think about systems that weren't built for everyone, and how do we rebuild the systems that include and are equitable for all, and having the arts, all sorts of arts and creative minds are a key part of that. So I'm a little bit of a sneaky arts advocate when we're having conversation, like well, can we bring an arts partner into this conversation? What can we be doing? So that's what I'm doing now. The same skill set and the same type of work, just in a different sector.
There's other questions from you, audience members, things you're
Something in
dying
chat.
to know.
Oh, the size of your
Hometowns versus graduating
the
classes.
population of
Oh,
your hometown. That's
I think my high school class was like 500, so I'm
Yeah.
closer to the 700 size.
although Audrey, I could imagine that was probably a really lovely way to, I mean, like what a sense of community if your entire like hometown-ish is around 700. I'm sure it had its challenges too, because then you can never go anywhere without running into somebody that you don't know or knows your whole family or whatever.
No.
I absolutely loved my little hometown village. When I was first like a teenager and stuff, it was just really irritating because there was nothing to do. We live in a jack squat middle of nowhere, right? You had to go like half an hour just to get into town. But like coming out of high school, I found that I just really, really love the people that are in there. My dad's a pastor at one of the churches that are one of like the 87 churches that are in our village. There's so many churches, but like so many of like the teachers and stuff are very in tune with their students' needs and stuff, and very passionate about their students. And I went home this past weekend actually, and got to catch up with some of my friends, and I went back to like my church, and like, you know, one of the families there had made me like homemade plum jelly, and I have it in my dorm right now, and I haven't gotten a chance to eat it. I need to go get like bagels or something, but it's just really nice. It's just and it's just like one of those things I also really like about NKU is just because like the classroom sizes are about similar to what they were in high school, which is like right around 20 for the most part for most of the classes. And so it's just, I really like it.
I absolutely loved my time at NKU. Like I wish I had savored that time a little bit more, because I mean, I do have nothing but fond memories when I look back. So that's why I was getting nostalgic at the beginning of the call. Like, you guys are on campus and it's fall and it's beautiful, and
Like fall is like the best time on most college campuses. Yeah, you're not exhausted yet, and
Right.
it smells good. It's comfortable. One thing you were talking about earlier was the story about the piano and writing the grant to get the piano. It reminded me, I'm going to go into like honors 101 mode for a second, but we often think about in our writing trying to communicate to our audience, our readers, like why they should care about our research paper, right? Even if it's some super obscure project. And I feel like the same idea is kind of true for grant writing, right? That you could have a totally non-sexy topic, like we need some cash to buy a new piano, but you have to tell a story about that, and you have to make your reader understand why this matters. And how you do that differs depending on your audience and those kinds of things. But I think we often get in like research paper mode, like college paper mode, but there's so many other kinds of writing out there that the same principles apply, as far as like thinking about your audience and thinking about what's going to motivate them to keep reading and to care about what you're saying.
Yeah, that's really true. And one thing that I have found to be successful in writing grants, which could hopefully translate into some of the papers that you're writing or projects you might be working on, is that in most cases, so the piano example, when we submitted that grant, the foundation that we submitted the grant to already knows who the symphony is. We didn't have to spend a lot of time saying the symphony was founded in 19, and so we kind of cut a lot of that out and just went straight to, this is what we know the foundation is interested in and how you want to better our community. And this is how coming together with us as a partner, even though it's like a piano, would create this ripple impact. And so we really focused a lot on, this is what we know you're interested in, and this is how we can, be a vessel to help you accomplish that goal as a partner, and kind of like zoomed out a little bit in terms of, this is how it will benefit our community. And for those that are able to come and experience the music in person, and the ability, a lot of it was also highlighting the old piano and how it was not up to par. And then like that kind of like diminishes a little bit of the live experience. And so there were a lot of things that we could kind of compare and contrast between what the current existing, like the current problem was, and then what the new piano would give us. It was a really tricky grant to write, because in some cases, if you're talking about like kids need access to art at their school, I think two of you on this call said, I don't know if we had a ton of that. I think there were two of you that said that. That is like a really clear cut case, like kids need access to arts education for all these reasons. So that's easier to write about than here's why we need a piano, in comparison to the same foundation might be getting a grant where it's a homeless shelter and they need beds and linens. And so sometimes that can be a little tricky in the art sector to think about what we're offering in comparison to like just day-to-day needs, like mental health. You all mentioned mental health as a really important, passionate, area of yours. And we think about like food needs and housing and transportation. And so what has been successful is thinking about the arts as a contributor to our community, and how working in tandem with, or in collaboration with some of those other partnerships, explains why, or I think justifies why you might need a piano versus beds at a homeless shelter. I will tell you, I had to pitch one time, like in person to a panel of people. It was like a Shark Tank kind of situation. And all of the people that were pitching were in the same room with each other. And so we could see everyone else's presentation, and we had to go right after a local food bank that was like funding, or they were asking for funding for their after school program, and like the power packs for kids who don't have food at home. And we were scrambling, like in my brain, I was like, how am I going to get up there and talk about like our arts programs and it still be as impactful as like kids need food after school? So that can be a challenge sometimes. Doesn't mean either one is less important. It's just kind of a different strategy and how you lay it out. But that was I was like sweating in my boots that day.
I think that's actually, so one of the things we also ask Honors 101 students to do is to present like a 5 to 7 minute, not even that long, I think it's more like 4 to 5 minute presentation of their research sort of in progress, in November. And I think it's easy sometimes to think like, oh, oral presentations are just something they make me do in high school, and I got to do it from time to time in college, and nobody's ever going to make me really do an oral presentation in the real world. So I think that's a good example of like, you may actually have to do like an elevator pitch or a sales pitch, those kinds of things. So it's a good. And I will say,
we both ended up getting a grant, that other organization as well as us. But and again, I think similar tactics in that we acknowledge the severity and the realness of the other needs in the room. And we made sure to acknowledge like, hey, we get that there are kids that need food, and here's what else we're offering as a way for the funder, XYZ funder, to help achieve their goals. So I think really coming in with that partnership frame of mind, instead of like hate with your hat out, like just humbly asking for whatever they'll give you in hopes that you can do a good thing. More people are inclined when you come in and you're like, I know you're really passionate about X, Y, and Z. We can do this great work together. And they're like, where do I sign?
Well, that was one of the things that came up in our class this summer. The idea of fundraising is it's not just you begging for funds to support your thing, but showing that you can help somebody else accomplish their goals.
And I will share if this is helpful for this group, it's not arts related, but as you go about your professional career and you get to a point where you may have to ask someone for something, maybe it's grant funding for your research, maybe it's a raise, maybe it's, an internship and they're not offering to pay you, but you want to be like, whatever the situation is. I initially thought that I could never go into a field of fundraising. I'm a very laid back, go with the flow personality, and sales jobs to me sounded like torture. And I've actually done really well in that field. And so it's not scary when you can use certain tactics coming in as like a partnership or a collaboration and doing your research and laying out like, here's where we overlap and here's where we can help one another versus can you give me X, Y, and Z? And that has been really helpful. And it's not as scary to ask for whatever it is you might wanting to ask for. And in those cases where you might be applying for grant funding for research or another need, and you're going to someone, they're there with resources to give away. So you're helping them achieve their mission rather than hopeful that they just take to you kindly and give out money. And so that was another thing that I had to learn, was that I have value coming to the table with a request just as much as they have value with resources to link together. So it kind of shifts the power dynamic a little bit from, gosh, I hope they say yes because they have all the power, to you coming to the table with, here's what I can offer and we can work together. And it gives you a little more confidence because you really are bringing something to the table, and whatever the situation is, you're asking for a raise or money or what have you.
I wanted to comment on the chat box, just since that doesn't always get translated in recorded videos. But Audrey, you said that it's interesting how important all these things are and how connected they are in human nature in general, that humans need food and housing and support, but they also need the language and the methods to express themselves, whether that's through art, music, poetry, whatever. It's sad that so many people disregard the importance of expression. It's a good thought.
Yeah. That's very true.
So yay, arts.
Yeah. And there's some interesting data through ArtsWave where they are raising money from just Joe Smith in neighborhoods across the region, and that a lot of people are donating to the arts, and they may not even buy a ticket or interact with the arts at all, but they're doing it because they know they know in their gut that the arts are good to have. And so that's really fascinating data when you think about how many people just know that instinctively, but then sometimes we create environments in our companies and in our schools where we don't let the arts have a seat at the table or even thrive. And so we have 3 new advocates on this call, I think, to help advocate for and
there's those like micro donations are a rising phenomenon, right? Where you just give $1 or something like through social media. And then I think Audrey, it was you commenting on you were an advocate through social media. And so many arts organizations have social media like jobs, right? That there are people whose sole job is to do messaging through various social media. So use your generational like know-how.
Yes.
Absolutely. Old people like me have no business on social media, but you definitely, if you bring skill sets that are part of sort of what you grew up understanding or what you were learning right now in college, that could be really valuable for any kind of organization.
And TikTok is quickly becoming a fundraiser's like playground. There are lots of folks that are now on TikTok creating viral content and raising money for various causes.
And I feel like I would be remiss as an employee of NKU to not mention that universities are also very frequently nonprofit organizations, and that there are whole fundraising wings of universities. There are jobs at NKU right now in fundraising to sort of help other students get scholarships and sponsor new initiatives on campus. So if you're really passionate about education or you really want to support your alma mater or another university, that's like a whole other area of nonprofits you can get into.
There's a call center on campus where you can get a job as a, I don't know what the exact title is, but you can be raising money for the scholarship fund. I know I get my NKU call a couple times a year to support various causes. And sometimes I'll get a call from someone who also went to, the School of the Arts, or there's some sort of connection. But if calling folks and making that pitch does not seem as scary after this conversation, you might want to look into it if you need a job or some extra money.
Cool. Any last questions or last thoughts from our guest?
I will drop my email if you haven't already shared it, Leanne. I'm happy to share my my work email, and you can reach out at any time if you've got questions about what's happening at StriveTogether, where I'm at now, or if you might want to dip your toe into some arts organizations, or you're not quite sure where to start, or maybe you're feeling a little shy in reaching out. I'm happy to be the buffer and do an introduction or help provide some information. So feel free to come.
So it's at Shibiya, SHIBIYA
K
at StriveTogether.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say my NKU, but because I don't teach consistently every semester, it turns into a little bit of a graveyard for a while until I'm like back. And
there's also, you mentioned you got your second degree at NKU through the public administration program, which is actually on the top floor of the same building as the Honors College. So if you're interested, those are PAD classes in the catalog. So you can explore those.
Yeah. And we had an undergrad in that class this summer. So you don't have to fully be graduate level, I believe, to take the arts admin class if you're interested.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you to all the students who showed up. This was great.
Yeah, it was really great meeting the three of you, and Brittany as well. Thanks for facilitating behind the scenes. And then reach out if I can be of assistance at all in the future.
All right. Good deal.
All right.
Thanks,
Good luck,
everybody.
Steve.
Bye.
Bye.